Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Good evening and welcome to the December installment of the 2021 Field Archaeology Series on Thursday, or FAST. My name is Buck Robertson, and I am this year's FAST coordinator. Every month, FAST features a public-facing lecture presenting the latest in archaeological research from University of Michigan students, faculty, and researchers. FAST is generously supported by the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology, Department of Classical Studies, and the Interdepartmental Program in Classical Art and Archaeology. But FAST is ultimately made possible by an eager and engaged audience and world-class speakers. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone in attendance, both those in person and virtually, and ask for your patience in the event of any complications which may arise from the hybrid format, as has happened in the past. If you are tuning in virtually, I would like to remind you to remain muted for the duration of the lecture, although we will welcome questions at the end of our talk. But without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce this month's FAST speaker, Dr. Marco Cavalazzi. Dr. Cavalazzi is an EU-funded Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow here in the department of, in our department from the University of Bologna. His research focuses on the history of rural landscape in late antiquity and the medieval period, and his current project centers on furthering 3D integration in the recording of archaeological features. His lecture is entitled Living Around a Byzantine Capital, Ravenna and Its Hinterland After the End of the Roman Period, Landscape, Settlements, and Environment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cavalazzi.
Good afternoon, thank you all. Okay. As already said, I'm a postdoctoral researcher of the University of Bologna, and here as a Marie Curie researcher, we spend at the University of Michigan more or less more than 1 year. We stay here till mid-December, more or less. I will come back as the University of Michigan the next year, the next fall. And this afternoon, I would like to discuss with you this topic, living around the Byzantine capital, Ravenna and its hinterland after the end of the Roman period. And also, I would like to introduce my research project, my Marie Curie project, and explain how this project is linked and related to this topic. And so, let's start this lecture with a brief introduction, discussing the historical context which characterized the city of Ravenna. The history of capital as a capital city for Ravenna started in 402, as probably all of you know, when the Emperor Honorio transferred the capital from Milan to Ravenna. The purposes were defensive, so Ravenna was surrounded by marshes and swamps, and so was easily defendable. But also before this period, Ravenna was a relevant center in the Empire and the Republic. It was part of the state of the Republic since the 1st century BCE, and after was chosen at the beginning of the imperial phase by the Emperor Augustus to host part of the fleet, the imperial fleet. And thus after the late antique period, Ravenna remained a central settlement in the empire. It was the capital of the Exarchate during the Greek, starting from the period of the Greek-Goth War, and so more or less the 540 CE. And after, it was conquered by the Lombard kings, but its importance was always relevant also during the Middle Ages. For example, at the end of the 10th century CE, the Germanic Emperor Otto III chose Ravenna to build his own palace and stay here a long period, as it did in Rome.
That just occurred to me. Got
Yeah.
the room mic. Do you mind if we
Yeah.
have this? We can move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
This just-
Okay. Does it work?
Okay. Can you not hear that?
Does it
Okay.
work? Okay.
Okay. Cool.
From the geographical point of view, as you can see from this map, Ravenna is located today also in the Po Valley. It's an alluvial floodplain created by the River Po, the longest river of Italy. So historically, the hinterland of Ravenna went from the River Po to the Apennine Range mountains, the Apennine Mountains range. And this ridge, the ridge of the Apennine Mountains separates Ravenna from the central and southern Italy, and thus the hinterland of Ravenna was easily connected with the other city of the Valley, like Milan, such as Milan or Venice, and it was more difficult to reach the central and southern Italy, but not complex at all. Today, the hinterland of Ravenna is characterized by a varied landscape. In the hinterland, the hinterland is characterized by an agricultural landscape, while the coastland is strongly urbanized and totally, completely devoted to the touristic activities. But in the past, the landscape was completely different. Ravenna was chosen as capital of the empire because it was surrounded by marshes and swamps. But there was another important and relevant factor that it was that Ravenna was connected with the River Po, or at least with the southern branches of the River Po. The Emperor Augustus himself built a channel to be sure that the harbor of Ravenna classes was easily reachable by boat. And Ravenna, thanks to this channel that was called Fossa Augusta, was connected with a mixed network of channels and roads that put in contact Ravenna with the other cities of the Po Valley and of the Northern Adriatic Sea, Northern Adriatic coast like Adria, or for example, Ortino or Aquileia itself. During the Middle Ages, this situation did not change. The Po, the branch of the River Po was even closer to the city, as you can see from this map. Here it's represented the geography of the Ravenna hinterland during the late Middle Ages. So we are talking about the period between the 11th century and the 15th century CE. As you can see, the main branch of the River Po was called Po of Frumaro, and it was more or less 15-20 kilometers north of the city. Which is the situation from the archaeological point of view regarding the Ravenna hinterland. The interest of archaeologists arose recently, more or less during the 90s, and so at the end of the past century. Anyway, as you can see here, it's a well-studied area, well-studied hinterland. The first was the University of Venice that started systematic project in the Ravenna hinterland. We were around the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, and studied the area of the ancient Forum Corneli, currently Imola, the city of Imola, and the area of Cesena, the Latin Caesena, with a systematic survey. And after started an extensive excavation in the emporium, the medieval emporium of Comacchio, north of Ravenna. From the beginning of the 21st century was the turn of the University of Bologna Postdoctoral project, an extensive excavation in the port, in the harbor of Ravenna classes, and several systematic survey in the hinterland of Ravenna. The Byzantine project, the additional project, and the Curie project. Today, I would like tonight to focus in particular on the ongoing projects. When this project started, there were a lot of open questions, and today some of them are still open. First of all, the problem of the settlement pattern evolution. Nucleation or dispersion? This is not a secondary question because in other parts of Italy during the Middle Ages, the process of nucleation of the habitat, of clusterization, brought to the birth of medieval villages. Some of them nucleated village, nucleated settlement, was interested also by the process of encapsulation, and so the birth of medieval castles. You can understand that this process of nucleation of the settlement is strongly related with other phenomena connected with socio-political, with relevant socio-political processes. And second question, the problem of the economical networks in commerce. We have good knowledge about what happened and what was the situation during late antiquity, in particular, thanks to the excavation in Classe that started more or less at the beginning of the 21st century. But our level of knowledge is superficial for the Middle Ages and for the Roman period also. And we are not able to answer to this question as crisis or continuity. Without this kind of data and knowledge, we can answer in a proper manner to this question. There was a Roman legacy or not in the settlement pattern evolution. We are sure that there was gap in the settlement pattern evolution, in particular during the 3rd century CE and after, between the 7th and 8th century CE. But we are not sure how deep they influenced the pattern evolution, the settlement pattern evolution. And without this kind of data, we are not able to clearly define which was really the role of Ravenna and the relationship between the city and its hinterland. Why can be interesting studying Ravenna? What does archaeology care about the city and its hinterland? In my opinion, studying Ravenna and the archaeological research can try to cast a light on these two great questions. First of all, how power can transform and shapes landscape. And second, how humankind deals with the environment, its change and the natural extreme events connected. So today, I would like to focus the second part of this lecture on these 5 main topics related to the title of the lecture. First of all, I would like to discuss with you the first problem, the settlement pattern evolution. So I would like to present an updated state of art of this problem, what happened after the end of the Roman period and during the Middle Ages from this point of view. Second, I would like to present some processes related to the long-term land reclamation. They are processes characterizing the Ravenna hinterland, and they are connected with strong environmental changes. So this process, as well as the local social ecological systems, have to deal in the past, have to deal with relevant environmental changes that strongly affected the settlement evolution and the transformation, the evolution of landscape. And finally, fourth point, I would like to discuss about this topic, the relation between countryside and urban settlements. And finally, I would like to introduce the bigger project that is the title, the acronym of my Marie Curie project, and explain how it is connected to this topic. The acronym stands for BIM and GIS integration, a new method for documenting field archaeology. So let's start from the first point, settlement patterns evolution. So summarizing this picture as I wrote in this slide, I took the picture from the book of Roberts, Landscape of Settlement, Prehistory to Present. The problem of the settlement evolution in the hinterland of Ravenna was first discussed by the historians. Historians linked to the school of the University of Bologna and of the University of Verona. And they thought that there was a strong continuity in the landscape and the settlement evolution between the Roman period and the Middle Ages. This vision was supported also by the researches of the classic topography, la topografia classica, of the school of the Bologna University. The centuriations of the Roman division was perfectly conserved in most of the Ravenna hinterland. But starting from the end of the 90s of the past century, some historians started to have some doubts about this assumption. The most recent archaeological research shows that the patterns are locally defined. And if these historians would have chosen these slides, this section of the picture, currently the best choice is this one. So the most representative section of this spectrum of the whole Ravenna hinterland is the red one. So a mixed settlement pattern. Let me show some example about it. The first was an old survey of the University of Venice in the area of Cesena. Cesena is in the southern part of the Ravenna hinterland, and as you can see from the picture on the right side of the slide, the archaeologists investigated several portions of this area. They're talking about more or less 240 square kilometers, and they investigated the 10% of this area. It's not a big part, big proportion. Anyway, they documented, they detected a substantial continuity in the landscape between the Roman period and the medieval ages. Anyways, somewhere in some part of the Cesena hinterland, there were different trends. Here, you can see a picture of the northern transect of this survey. Here, the archaeologists detected several nucleated sites. This is not only, it's not the only case documented of this kind, and they thought and they saw that this kind of clustered sites are related to sites that to historical sites that have a religious predominance, a religious role, and a productive role function. For example, rural farms. Another case study is the Decimano survey. We are southern of Ravenna. The Decimano area is characterized by a great and deep geomorphological stability, and so it was a sort of natural agricultural background for the city since the Bronze Age and after when the city born. So here you can see that the area that was investigated by the University of Bologna through a systematic survey between the 2001 and the 2006. The archaeologists also in this case documented a substantial continuity with the dispersed pattern of Roman origin, but anyway, in some case, there was also here a different trends. Here you can see an example in the center, in the panel, in the center of the slide. You can see the sites, archaeological area of a late antique site that is dated back from the 5th to the 7th century CE, colored in red. This was probably a great rural villas devoted to the agricultural exploitation of this area. But this site changed very deeply during the 8th and 9th century CE, when you can see this site here, when his aspect changed deeply, and its place was taken by a clustered sites. And you can see this dispersion colored in violet that was a clustered site. Another case study from the Basso Roman survey, that is a project that is carried on also by the University of Bologna, is an ongoing project. It started in the 2009 and is still in progress. You can see in the picture on the left, on the right side of the slide, the sampling strategy of this project. Colored the different areas that were investigated during the past field campaigns. And here, in this map, you can see represented by the black dots, the archaeological sites that we detected during the field campaign. The two panels signed with the letter identified by the letter B and A represent two areas in which we found late antique and high medieval sites, early and high medieval sites. The late antique sites, archaeological sites, are dispersed in the countryside, and so they follow an ancient pattern, a Roman pattern. While during the early and high Middle Ages, the trends are different. In the panel with the letter B, you can see several nucleated settlements that are represented by the triangle, the blue triangle. While in the panel signed with the letter A, you can see several medieval sites. They are dated more or less between the 8th, 9th century to the 13th century, 12th, 13th century, but they are dispersed. And so we have two possibilities here. One is dispersed and one was clustered and nucleated. So today we can say that the mixed settlement pattern is the most representative pattern for the Ravenna hinterland. But there are still, till today, there are unsolved questions: why nucleated, why dispersed, which were the mechanism that determined this transformation. And can written sources, the analysis of the written sources, answer to this question? Some of the historians said that the written sources of the Ravenna hinterland are silent because they did not mention the settlements. From the cultural point of view, the Ravenna hinterland is a very conservative area, and the way the written documents was made is the same during the Middle Ages than in the Roman period, more or less. And so they're very conservative. And in other part of Italy, the documentation mentions the settlement, but not in the Ravenna hinterland. And finally, what really were these cluster settlement? We need more data to answer to this question, because, for example, none of these settlements that I showed you was really investigated. None of these settlements have been systematically excavated. So in the next year, this will be the target. Second topic, long-term recognition processes. This topic was traditionally investigated by the French school, so the archaeology, and the Bologna school of the classic topography. Because this problem was strictly connected to the problem of centuration, so the Roman land division. They based their research on the written sources analysis, on non-systematic survey, without collecting and studying finds, archaeological finds, and on a morphometric approach crossed with the study of geopathological data. Here I inserted in here this picture from a work of Gérard de Choquet that studied the land division, the medieval land division of the Ravenna hinterland. Anyway, this kind of approach are not enough for some portions of the Ravenna hinterland because of the great variability, geomorphological variability that characterizes this portions of the Ravenna hinterland. Here you can see a map in which the red dots represent the archaeological sites that were documented during the archaeological survey of the project Bassa Romandiola, and the black dot represents the sites, the archaeological sites already known before the beginning of the project. The green line represents a section, a geoarchaeological section that put together different kinds of data, archaeological data, previous known data, geoarchaeological corings, and so on. Despite the regularity of this landscape, the situation in the subsoil is very different. So in surface, we have a centuration still conserved in a great part of the Bassa Romagna, the Bassa Romandiola area. Anyway, it's under the soil surface, the situation is very more complex, and the processes of conservation, restoration of the land division were also very complex. And here, the section that was represented by the green line that I showed you before, you can see that you can appreciate this complexity. We are in the area of the Ravenna Castle and Budrio. Ravenna was a castle that was born more or less around the 12th century, 13th century. Budrio is a rural church that was attested in the written sources starting from the 13th, 12th century. Here in this area, the archaeological survey detected several archaeological sites dating back from the late antiquity to the 15th, 14th century, more or less, including the castle of Ravenna itself. And here are the different diagnostic, geoarchaeological analysis and tests that we took. You can see in this section different yellow sand deposits that represent the ridges of the rivers that crosses this part of the lowland. We start from the San Martino ridge here on the left, that was dated more or less between the 12th and 16th century. The Ravenna ridge dated probably to the Roman period, and surely after the 9th century before Christ, before Christian era, or Barbiano ridge, 13th century, Budrio or Croce Coperto ridge, the 12th century, and so on. So this section show how was complex the process of recovery of the land division and centuration during this period, and how this process had to face several extreme events like floods. And this extreme event, as well as other environmental changes, are characterizing the Ravenna hinterland in a very deep manner. Here, another example, we are north of Ravenna, in the area of the marshes that surrounded the city during the Middle Ages, in a zone more or less near the path of the Fossa Augusta, the channel built by the Emperor Augustus. Here we did a mechanical coring that is named ECR 02. It is represented here in the picture, in the map. And here what we found, more or less 4 meters deep from the surface, a thin level of river sand was separating pit levels from connected to marshes and swamps from marine sands connected to the lagoon environment. The C14 dating suggests these results 200 CE. The XRF exam analysis of the sands was compatible with the sands, the deposit of the river Po. So here, the flood connected with the river Po was connected to a great environmental change that deeply transformed the landscape during more or less the beginning of the 3rd century CE, and transformed this lagoon into marshes. Probably the coastland went eastwards, creating new dunes, closing the lagoons and creating a closed wetlands, and so the marshes. And this is also probably why in the 6th century, the author that described Ravenna described an environment completely different from what the author of the classic period said. For example, Jordanus was an author of the 6th century, said that the port of Augustus was completely buried in the 6th century. And so this is probably a transformation that is connected to this event. Fourth topic is the relationship between the countryside and the urban settlements. Clearly, during the 5th century, Ravenna reached its acme. It has a great network of that connected the city with the whole Mediterranean, in particular East Mediterranean Sea. Anyway, after this period, the situation changed. It said that Ravenna conserved an important and relevant role also during the medieval centuries. Anyway, its network was completely different during this period. And this example shows clearly how the situation changed. We are south of Ravenna, and here is located the city of Curie. The city of Curie was a newborn city that was born during the 9th and 10th century CE. So we are more or less 25 kilometers south of Ravenna. So we are very near to the city. Anyway, here was born a city, a newborn city. And so this represents really well how the network of Ravenna changed during the medieval period. Curie was a productive city, was connected with the salt production. In fact, it was founded inside this lake where salt was produced. We started a systematic excavation, an extensive excavation in the site of Curie, that is a newborn city, medieval newborn city, but also an abandoned city. The site of Curie was abandoned during the 17th century for environmental geomorphological motivations, and the city was transferred on the shoreline where today is. Anyway, we investigated also the countryside around the site of Curie. And here, there is one of the turns that we investigated during the 2019. You can see these dots are archaeological sites. None of these sites are dated after the 11th, 12th century. And so here we have a city that was growing during the 11th, 12th century. And here we have a countryside in which the site disappeared, were abandoned during the same period. So probably the city started to the city started to attract the people in the new place. Finally, I would like to conclude with the introduction about the bigger project. As I said, with the bigger project, that is BIM and GIS integration, the method for documenting field archaeology, we are trying to test the integration between two existing technologies, building information modeling and geographical information system, that currently are tested in different fields of the research to document the 4D nature of the physical world. And you have probably seen that we are dealing with a very varied data set. So data of different nature coming from different methods of research, geoarchaeology, excavation, survey, geophysicals. And so in this project, we're trying to understand if this integration between two different technologies, BIM and GIS, can help to document the 4D nature of the archaeological evidence and help to reach a synthesis of these different kind of data. So we have to deal with the technological aspect of this problem, but also with the theoretical aspect of documenting and interpreting the archaeological evidence produced by the excavation, but not only, as well as by other methods of research, like survey, like geophysics, like geoarchaeology. So if you are interested in this project, please follow the project on the European official channel, that is Curie's website of the Europe, or more easier on the Facebook page of the project, Archeologia dei Paesaggi di Ravenna, Ravenna Landscape Project. So with this, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cavalazzi, for your talk. I would also like to thank our sponsors, the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology, the Interdepartmental Program in Classical Art and Archaeology, and particularly the Department of Classical Studies, whose library we're in right now. Get this real quick.